Hey everybody. It's a warm, breezy afternoon in November. These sort of a refuse pile here, what the humans have decided to throw away. And there's some living beings here, these aloe plants. Some of them very old. Suddenly the humans decided, well, we don't want that one. So they pile it up here, but one of the things that's here are these palm fronds, right? And I accidentally discovered that these fronds they make a really good drum. It's the natural drum. Don't have to do anything to it. Fronds fall off and they curl up as they dry out, and that becomes resonant when touched. The old dried out body sings when it's touched, when it's tapped. I'm thinking today of all of the beings and living places that transferred to me something as precious as it is inconceivable. They gave their lives so I could live. Their children died so I could live. Their parents died so I could live. And when we think about life in the way that we do as a tree of gifts, given forward, and some thefts, not gifts, things which are taken. The impossible magnitude, the impossible to conceive magnitude of the gifts of the living beings, so that I could take one breath or have one heartbeat of life. Things I have had millions of. The gift that life gives to all beings. The profundity of that gift. The richness and depth and preciousness of this gift. And we cannot see in our ordinary consciousness the the immensity, the mountains and mountains and mountains of beings behind us in time, who lived and dreamed and hoped and suffered, to make the living world. To keep the little blue space rock alive for all beings, for all mothers, for all fathers, for all brothers and sisters, for beauty and nobility, for adventure and struggle and trial and death and suffering and isolation, for pain, for hope, for ecstasy, for wonder, for awe, for reverence, for virtues we have no names for our modern minds no longer recognize them. But our hearts are far older, and they remember. So too our organs and our cells and all of our relations. For all the seeming articulation and power of thought, it's also blind. And in fact, though we may not always understand this or be aware of it, thought seems to be very peculiar, human thought, in that it may require a kind of departure from relation, from embodiment, right? Many of our most revered discoveries, it's a very charged word there, arise from the capacity to depart from embodied existence into the strange hinterlands of abstraction and language and concepts, logics, rationality. And we can see the produce of this. It's both beautiful and terrifying. The calculus is beautiful. The atomic bomb is an atrocity. It should never have existed. Relativity is an astonishing array of ever-expanding insights and platforms from which we might gain deeper insight. But our collectives and institutions use these discoveries for terrifying things that kill. And they kill in the same way the humans think, abstractly. They don't kill because this being must die. They kill because the living spaces of the world and in our hearts and in our humanity are diametrically opposed to the orientations that produce war and machines and technologies and objects. And the humans have been producing billions and billions and billions of objects. They have been very busy in recent generations converting the remaining ecologies into disposables. And this is truly tragic. And it will come to an end. And perhaps the humans will come to an end with it because their gifts for abstraction made them vulnerable. Individually, but much more collectively vulnerable. We have no good. There are very few models of something resembling an intelligent collectivity at the broad scales of our social nature as humans. Those broad scales seem to have been captured by something whose activity deeply resembles demons, and I think we should not be too quick to dismiss that resemblance. Neither should we write it in stone. Well, we should recognize it. Endlessly hungry, kills everything. The only reason is more hunger and more killing and more object manufacture. And then those objects are disposed of along with the beings who gave their lives to produce them. You know, we might not be too unhappy to give our life for something true and beautiful that we trust, that we believe in. In fact, preserving our lives for the sake of things we do not trust or believe in, this may be one of the greatest errors of our time, for it does not result in happiness to preserve a life rendered meaningless role-less, identityless, in a world of swarming objects and representations. Nobody wants to give their life for a roll of paper towels or a plastic bottle that aspirin will go into, and that will later be discarded and kill many beings and poison the world. No one wants to give their life for this. Nothing wants to give its life for this. For that's ignoble, and ruinous to the spirit of sharing that underlies living beings. The spirit of shared risk, shared value, shared intelligence, shared beauty, shared suffering, shared opportunity, shared benefit. You know, I've heard many humans argue that nature is red in tooth and claw. This is an old trope. And it partakes of a problem that I want to talk a little bit about. The problem of the unjustified and often universal generalization of a property or a behavior or something witnessed to all members of a superclass. And it's hard to find a more astonishingly profuse superclass than the word nature. You know, in most of time-space, which is most of what there is, nature is neither red, nor has teeth, nor has claws. And I've spent a lot of time in living places with living beings. Not, not a thousandth of what I would have liked, or what I would like. And I do not see this red in tooth and claw idea. No. There is an aspect of nature that might resemble this idea. But in looking with me right now, here, I do not see nature ripping itself and me apart to shreds and bloody gore, and humans I see doing this. Not so much nature. The universal extension of the generalization is not only unjustified, it's patently false. Most of the time in most of nature, there's symbiosis. There's a sort of there's a library of old agreements. Yeah. And yes, there is predation and killing and eating and things. But what is the general? If we're going to generalize about things, well, what does the generality look like? Well, it does not look like slaughter to me. And, people could argue and say, well, you haven't seen, sharks working schools of fish in the ocean, or lions and tigers working a gazelle troop, or, wolves working a bison pod. It's true, I haven't seen those things face to face, but I know enough to know that if the wolves take down a bison, lots of beings get fed, not just wolves. And they don't take down 10 or 50 or 1,000 bison per day, they take down a bison. Right? And that doesn't look red in tooth and claw to me at all. Now, I began with a kind of universal generalization. It's not that that we should fear all of them or be concerned about all of them. But we should be very careful to notice when somebody's making a declarative statement about qualities, right? Oh, people are just blah, blah, blah. Really? Which people? Because actually people have cohorts, and the cohorts all do different things. And you can find cohorts that do the explicit opposite of the different things. You can find cohorts that go in and assassinate people, and you can find cohorts and ecologies, and you can find cohorts that go in and rescue people in ecologies. So how will you tell me what the people do, how the people are? And I was thinking of this earlier because I was listening to some brilliant, really enjoying the discussions that I've been listening to between Sam Harris, I think Graham Morris, if I've got his name right, and Jordan Peterson. There's one particular discussion they have, excuse me, that's really good. And they're all really brilliant beings, really brilliant, wise men. And so that I'll come back to them, but so that I don't lose my thought, Peterson was making some comments about how the chimps of Gombe made a sort of a war parties they discovered, and that this work's been replicated elsewhere, where the chimps would patrol their terrain, and if they found, even one chimp from another cohort, or even a chimp that had previously belonged to their cohort but had emigrated, they would tear it apart. And he said, so chimpanzees do this. But it's not really true. Because I'm going to bet that, though I don't know the answer, and I'm happy to be corrected, in any group of chimps, there's a specific group of, subgroup of chimps that become interested in this role. So that some chimps may have experience of being involved in the killing of 15 or 20 or 30 or some other number of chimps in their lifetime, while other chimps will have zero involvement. And so can we reasonably say chimps do this? Because it is as if all of the social forms that humans and animals embody, they are like organs, right? And if all of your organs suddenly turned into your liver, you'd be dead. It wouldn't matter how good the liver is, right? If they all suddenly turned into your heart, dead. If they all suddenly turned into your pancreas, dead. If they all suddenly turned into your skin, exploded. So it's very important for us, especially today, to recognize when some facile generalization has been promoted to universality unjustifiably, right? Oh, those people are just blah, 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 blah. Really? What is someone saying this talking about? They're not talking about people, because the people are not before them. And in other languages, you would have to say, right? In older languages, it would be people who are not here, who I haven't met, but who I think exist somewhere, and they are existing right now in my thinking, have such and such a quality. Right? In older languages, it was much more difficult to lie via the bridge of abstraction, abstract language, making conclusive universal statements about classes of beings or phenomenon. I remember all the beings, all of the lives that were given for mine today. And that seems something to be worthy, that seems to me to be worthy of being thankful for at all times. But perhaps especially on this day, when traditionally in my nation, we express gratitude. It's a pretty bizarre expression that involves a lot of slaughter and killing and disastrous luxury. Nonetheless, there is a little insect inside a leaf, and I'm curious about it. And as I am getting older, my sight is not what it once was, so I need my magnifying glass. Oh, it's a little beetle. When I think about living beings, I know something simple. Each one is a unique way of being embodied, being in awareness, and not just locally. It's very clear to me that, in fact, if you look at what the humans are doing and the problems that I'm raising about what we're doing, you'll see that the collectivity is blatantly obvious, right? There's this incredible collectivity, but it's been captured by something that looks from out here to me to be evil or very, very bad. Most of our existing knowledge orbits around individuals because we conceive of individuals as kind of the foundation of a thing, right? That's what you can get a really good grasp on. You can isolate an individual, you can do things to them and see how they respond, and you can track this mathematically. Of course, you can only see less than 1% of how they respond, but you can see enough to get a grip on statistically and convince yourself that you've come to know things, which perhaps in some cases is true. But in many of them, what is known this way is almost more blinding than ignorance would be, because we're thinking about living beings and places in terms of single individuals and what happens when you put them all together, which is backwards. There are no individuals. Individuals are an expression of unions. In case this isn't obvious, consider your own Genesis, right? And it's not necessarily a terrible way to proceed unless we take it as authoritative, as having precedence, or being, the right way to look at things and beings. So, it isn't that chimps go around slaughtering people without religion, which was part of the topic with Harris and Peterson, of course. And I love listening to them. They both teach me so much. I don't have to agree with them. That is not the point. The point is to learn, right? To see beyond, to use what they have discovered that is good and useful, and not to worry too much about the other stuff for me. I don't have to. And there's a lot that's good and useful when minds like that come together to fight. Though they call it a discussion, they're actually kind of fighting, right? In a way. In a civilized way, actually. If we think about what the actual benefits of something that would truly resemble civilization would be, which we don't have really much, I would say. One of them would be that we no longer have to have wars because we can have discussions. And we can all learn, we can change our position, we can cooperate, we can collaborate. That starts to look a little more like civilization. The stuff that the humans in general are doing now, yes, it's a universal generalization. Yes, there are cohorts. It really looks like some kind of curse or abject dissociation, pathology, malware has gotten a hold of our collectives and is running them and life on Earth toward an overflowing graveyard. We should be very suspicious, I think, of unjustified generalizations. And there's, this kind of problem exists in every aspect of our modern lives and constructs. So we have people doing this for really bad reasons. Racism and genderism, which are, they're not concrete things, they're behaviors. But then we have almost as equally confused ideas on the other side. I should say an other side, or maybe the other sides. And I probably won't go deeply into this today because I intend to explore it elsewhere soon. But the idea that language tells us what things are, or that there's only one correct way to interpret a certain word and we will declare that way to you, or that the politics of identity should be dominated by language. And there should be things that we can say and things that no one can say anymore. The idea of correct speech is wildly confused, however compelling some of the moral and ethical imperatives that underlie its origins may be. And this is one of the things we must be very careful of as humans in the modern time, because we can have what appears to be a crucial moral and ethical imperative, and if we just allow the wrong vehicle to capture that imperative, it produces apocalypses in human lives and minds, in cultures. And we are in a situation like this now in the United States. We've seen it elsewhere. Problem is, most of us don't know history very well. And so, as Graham was saying brilliantly, everyone just goes to Nazi Germany for the example, and most of them don't even really understand what happened in Nazi Germany much at all. So they're afraid of something they know happened, but they don't have a deep understanding of how it happened or why it happened. And they're concerned about the wrong thing. Their threat focus has been inappropriately captured. And he told a story of a book that I don't recall the name of. Graham did. He said it was one of the greatest books ever, and it was about a cohort of people who decided what they didn't want to become. And they all made agreements around this, and they had methods and such, and they didn't want to become Nazis. But sure enough, a short time after these decisions, they found themselves, in the position of carefully segregating the Jews from the other people on an airplane. Something like this. And he was pointing out the danger of trying not to do something. This is incredibly important for humans because our nervous systems actually, at the basis of our physical biology, there's conflicts of all different kinds, and those conflicts are important. And some of those conflicts can be, I don't want to overuse the word, but they can be captured and used not even by people, but by movements. And it's hard to know what movements are if they are not the people. But there is some sort of upper layer, right? Collectivity, where the people form the collective, but they don't really control it. And not that we can control anything much. I mean, there's varying degrees. Not only do they not really control it, it's prone to be counterfeited and redeployed. The people themselves are prone to counterfeit and redeploy the principles that caused their original concern in a way that it's like an inversion of the principles, right? So it's better to go at something that we want together, in general, taking into account what the undesirables, rather than just like ramming our flag in the ground and saying, we won't do this. Because there's like an oppositional aspect of the psyche, which we can see in modern situations, very brilliantly illuminated by them. There's this aspect of the psyche that's just oppositional to authority. It's not the only aspect. There's aspects that are, many aspects of our minds are deeply and profoundly, in a nuanced way, the sort of progeny of authorization processes, various kinds, including conscious, like, oh, I believe that person because that person's trustworthy. They've demonstrated their trustworthiness. And I'm aware of this in an unusual way because I discovered it in an unusual way. My Blue Jay friends. I don't think I can easily talk about how this came into my awareness. But I became aware first that humans were susceptible to being drawn into trance, and that authorization has something to do with this. And there's different kinds of trance, many different kinds. But animals are also susceptible, and even insects, in my experience. And of course we have beliefs and opinions and ideas, and all of these are involved. Authorization is profoundly involved in all of those. But we are not conscious of these things. Most of us, or very, very few of us, are conscious of them. And even those of us who are conscious of them, it's a very sophisticated, complex situation. There's biology, there's some awareness, there's consciousness, there's history, there's uniqueness and diversity. In the current intellectual climate, the extremes on both sides of the political divide in the United States appear to me to be wildly delusional in different ways, but in a way that resembles each other. Yeah? The madness on both sides resembles the madness on both sides. And eventually I'm going to talk at length about some of my perspectives on the ideas that underlie political correctness and correct speech ideologies and things like this, which I'll just say briefly I find incredibly confused, startlingly confused. And again, it's not the imperatives that underlie them, the imperatives of recognizing the unique nature of each human being and respecting that nature. That's an important ethical principle to me. Always has been. But the vehicles presently at play look to me to be deceptively forged and allowed to propagate. I think they will have catastrophically bad results. In fact, I suspect they're capable of overturning whatever progress we may have made in this direction as a people in the United States and perhaps elsewhere. But that's a story for another day. So it isn't that chimpanzees can commit atrocity when they are apparently not under the influence of religious ideology, which is Sam's concern. It's not so much that, it's that in every group there are specialized cohorts, organs, that they derive their authority from the union of the group, and they enact protocols. For example, the killing of interlopers at the boundaries. But they don't kill all the interlopers, they only kill the chimp interlopers. And that's particularly interesting, because there's all kinds of intrusions on their terrain if they're trying to say this is our terrain. But the only one they are apparently concerned about is the chimps. And you could say, well, those are the only ones they have to compete with, blah, blah, blah. No, it's not true. It's actually very peculiar, and the humans, I mean, it might be arguably true that the humans have done more harm to the world by attempting to harm each other than they have by any other means. I'm not sure that's true, but it's conceivable. Right? It's not an entirely unlikely proposition. How hard is it, really, for us to get the message, do something other than commit constant atrocity against your own people in the history of life on Earth? Every other organism, pretty much without exception, implicitly understands this. Its cells are made of it, its organs are made of this, its relationships are made of this knowledge. Okay? But the humans, because we can think abstractly in a very special way. I'm not saying no other creatures do, but our way of doing it is extremely sophisticated compared to what we are used to observing in other creatures. And I personally suspect that, I don't suspect, I feel quite sure of it, using gentle language, that we're sharing the Earth with other extremely advanced intelligences advanced far beyond our own, but they don't take the form we expect, so we do not see them. And this is my experience of being alive on the world, and I want to go on record as having said this. And I am thankful for that. Because I found it very hard to believe that an animal like ours could arise in a world bereft of intelligences. And this is the common myth, right? The humans popped out of nowhere, suddenly endowed with astonishing cognitive capabilities on a world where everything else was stupid. Nope. Again, if you start by preferencing your unjustified biases, your next moves are going to be shitty. And they're probably going to keep being shitty for a long, long time. Most of the indigenous peoples, if not all of them, understood our species as the children, the new ones, the delicate, the fragile ones, not the domineering masters of reality. That some kind of a strange underlying narrative in our civilization has infected us with. That narrative cannot be true, but it is true in the sense that our technologies are powerful and our capacity to employ them for destructive ends is unlimited, in the sense of our small world. The boy blue jay, I put down 2 peanuts. One for the girl, one for the boy, but the boy blue jay, he weighed them both and decided which one had more mass and took that one first in case the other one wasn't there when he came back. Now, in order to do that, you have to imagine a future, right? And there's no way anyone would convince me the blue jays aren't intelligent. It's just not going to happen. I've watched them for too long. They're wildly intelligent. They know exactly who I am. They know when I enter this area. They know when I depart the area. But their intelligence is not particularly abstract, and they might not survive for long if it were, because in order for you to survive as an animal with an abstract intelligence, you have to have a lot of luxurious safety. And the reason for that is that if you don't have a lot of luxurious safety, while you're busy being disembodied and thinking about things that have nothing to do with where you are or who you are or the relationships around you, the predators will eat you, right? In fact, being distracted in nature is a signal that attracts predators, right? It's one of, predators don't just go around looking for something to eat, okay? Though, in part, this is true, but the part is too small. They go around looking for something, oh God. Well, actually, there's no way to make clear, assertive language. We could make suggestive language. The reason I can't assert what they do is that what they do is very sophisticated and simply won't fit in ordinary language. My goodness. I stuck this stick in the ground 8 years ago, and here it is, still here. They look for signs of disorientation, right? They look for creatures who are sick or injured, and they don't do this only because it makes it easier to get a kill. In fact, no one understands the complexity, though we have ideas about it. So a disoriented animal, an animal busy in its abstract thoughts walking around in nature, if nature hadn't been killed back to, only the small animals still exist, would be a very dangerous place for human beings because they get killed all the time while they were busy not paying attention to where they are and who they're with and what's around, and paying attention to some idea about a future or past possible situation or actual situation. So, unless you have an incredible safety buffer, which very few organisms have, though until the humans started hunting whales, whales had it, mostly. And until, we started obliterating the oceans, dolphins had it. And maybe some of our primate ancestors had something like this too. The luxury of being able to survive disembodied, abstract thought. And that luxury, in our species, it built upon its own foundations. We built upon the foundations of this luxury quite profoundly, so that we kept producing more luxury at an ever-increasing ecological cost. And you can see the outcomes of this in our modern civilizations. $732 billion spent on war machines. For wars we are not fighting, will not fight, and couldn't fight with the objects created that way. Right? There were a 1,000 better ways to fight wars, if we had to, than aircraft carriers and jet bombers and things. tanks and such, battleships. All of these things are long been obsolete. It's not that we're in a situation where they will never be required, but it is it's the crudest low-hanging path to the resolution of conflict, and it's the most expensive and unsupportable ethically path. In our current situation, we have language that is very strange. We have language, ideas in language, that supposedly pervade over all circumstances. Yeah, I'm gonna still have to avoid this topic, which is fine. It's not that beautiful. It's just important. The little lake is not the same without the tiny frogs. I remember the souls of my departed family, particularly the matrons in my family, because they ensured that the rituals of togetherness that happen so infrequently, birthdays, holidays, so on, they ensured that these were rich and that we all came together around them, and this was a crucially important foundational experience for me to have, and I feel very lucky because I know there are many, many people who do not have this experience, or they have a very dark experience, or they have an experience of just being alone or impoverished, or even hurt or injured or sick or broken. Now, of course, when I was younger, I took all of that for granted because I had not yet tasted a world where it didn't experience, where that wasn't part of my experience. That would come later in life when I became older and my progenitors passed away. And I speak particularly of my mother and my grandmother today. And even though the rituals were, representational, there was something very profound underneath them that was resonant and alive. And it even got into the adults, right? It even got into the males in my family. And when I think back to all of the people and animals and living places that have ever been on this world and that led to my coming to life and that supported my life, I know they did not exist for a reason, but there is a sacred purposive essence that all these beings share, and we share it with them, regardless of whether we pay attention or not. And in this essence, there are qualities like hope and fear and wonder, faith, reverence, awe, love, terror, desperation, agony, loneliness, loss, pain. Why does the little calf's mother have to be butchered by the humans? Why does the whale calf's mother have to be butchered? Why does the father have to die fighting the ship that kills it just to make things to sell? Just to make numbers in banks. That cannot be true, that cannot be good, that cannot be right. Something has gone profoundly wrong if this is the world. And it is. It's not the only thing. Like a crystal of sap. I've never seen anything quite like that before. It's amazing. The living beings and the living places it's uncommon that they commit anything resembling the atrocities that humans offhandedly commit all day, every day. Even if they do nothing more than drive a car, which I have often done. No, I think the humans are red in tooth and claw, and nature is a lot more diverse. The old agreements prevail among the living beings, but the humans have become confused about this. Most of them, many of them. And you could say, Darren, you're using that same unjustified extension of a generalization. But of course, when I'm speaking about the humans, I'm pointing at our collectives, primarily our institutions and our collectives. I mean, those are still us humans. It's very difficult to understand how to properly think about these matters because the collectives are not the same as individuals. And even though the collectives are comprised of individuals, these individuals have been role changed, right? Their role has been modified or articulated or artificially assembled in strange ways. Perhaps one day I will have good language to speak about that strange distinction. I have had before. I remember knowing ways to talk intelligently about this when I had a little help from far away. And I remember that help today too. It's very difficult to be alive right now. I mean, I don't know, compared to being dead, it might be really easy. But there's a lot of pain and confusion and suffering and fear, hope. And I think many of us have realized that we've been taking things for granted. Things like family members and food and friends and breathing, water. I have certainly come to recognize many of the features of my life I took for granted. Since the pandemic, it seems perhaps that civilization is on the verge of a series of transformations, and I suspect, as the humans are not likely to respond intelligently to the obvious signals in the environment of impending catastrophe, they're likely to double down on the things that produce it, right? So if you tell, for example, a people who love tuna that there are no tuna left, or very few, that will not necessarily cause them to preserve the tuna. What is more likely is you'll get a combination response of some cohorts trying to preserve the tuna and others trying to get the last tuna at any price, because those tuna will become staggeringly valuable. So when you tell the human collectives, something you use and depend on every day is going away, they're not intelligent enough to stop. What they tend to do is press down on the gas pedal twice as hard. Well, if it's going away, let's make it go away now, and let's get the last ones left so that we can, bank the profits. I wrote a story about this a long time ago called Eat the Sun, in which something the humans were doing was destroying the sun, and when they realized that it was destroying the sun, instead of stopping, they just quadrupled their activity. It's not funny. There's nothing humorous about that. There is an animal too disoriented to survive. And we don't have the right to put an end to the ancient ecologies. The fact that we're really interesting and peculiar and, articulate and make really profound face noises and write things on dead trees and stuff, none of that endows us with the authorization to end the world. I mean, there are more ants alive on Earth right now than there have ever been human beings. And the fishes and the birds and the plants and the cats and dogs and mice, butterflies and bees, all the living beings, the grasses, the herbs. This is their world. And has been far longer than it has been ours. There's no managing being necessarily that will come down and strike us down, though there might be. I think the sun loves the earth. And I think the earth is an organ of the sun. And if you try to kill that organ, other beings will respond. But even if there are no beings sort of above us, right, that look down on us and see from outside what we do as humans on earth, the context itself, right? If you set your own boat on fire, the ocean will take care of you, and it's not because there's gods. You don't need gods to handle stupidity. It mostly takes care of itself over time. Wow. This is a leaf like none I remember feeling. It's so different. It's thick and woody and had breakfast at a restaurant, and I ate the bodies of other living beings this morning. Well, the remains, some of the remains, the choicest parts of the remains. I'm not a misanthrope. I love the human beings, and I think that we have a unique array of roles and potentials on Earth that are staggeringly beautiful and unexpectedly really deep. Yeah, really deep. And what we're doing instead is like playing with garbage in comparison, being really fascinated with garbage. Poisonous garbage, actually. And I don't know, there are some humans who are aware of this, and some who try to resurrect this knowledge in small clades. But the overpowering momentum of the technical and technological and industrial civilization, it doesn't just wipe out ecologies. Those ecologies, somehow they live inside us, and when they disappear from the world, they disappear from our interiority. And that cannot be reconciled. That cannot be remediated. It seems to me true that what happens to the bees and the whales and the elephants and the apes, it happens inside us instantaneously. And so as the ecologies collapse, the capacities for insightful intelligence among our people are very likely to collapse with them. In fact, it's hard to see how some other outcome might obtain. The humans imagine themselves as distinct from the ecologies. There's no possible way that can be true. We can try to kill them off so that we are all that's left. That's not going to work, right? Though we could kill off most of what's alive pretty easily, I think, at the moment, if anyone had a mind to, and maybe even if they didn't. But again, we have to be careful, going back to an earlier thread, we have to be careful. It's important to remain aware of what we don't want to do or become, but we must pursue what is good as well. We must pursue what is wise and heartful and true to our nature and essence and relationships, true to our origins, true to our ancestors, true to the living world. In relation, not idea. Idea matters too, but the relationships are where it's really going on. I am thankful every day. And in that sense, this day is not so special. But in the sense of recalling the traditions of my family and the people I grew up among, this day is special. And I have no objection. May your ways in life and dreaming be blessed. And may you be surrounded by those you love and those who love you all your days. And on those days when you are not, may the living beings come and remind you that they too are your friends and companions from long, long ago. May we learn and grow together, this day and all our days, as we always have, as we always do.